everyone. In my presentation today, I will take you through the session on Unit 3, which is the utilization of National Textbook and Teacher's Manual. The module will be presented is Module 3-1, titled as Lesson Design in Science Teacher's Manual. In this module, it has 3 lectures, and in each lecture, there is an activity. The training objective of this module reads, by the end of this module, the participants will be able to 1. Explain how the lesson is designed in Science Teacher's Manual. 2. Describe the relationship between objectives, lesson flow, and assessment in Science Teacher's Manual. 3. Explain the difference between summative and formative assessment in Teacher's Manual. 4. Explain how each of the assessment type is used. Let's begin with this question. Have you ever come across an exam question which you have never taught the content in class? Share your experiences. Talk about how you feel and how did you react. Welcome back. Let's look at Lecture 1 on the alignment of objectives, lesson flow, and assessment. You are to find the grade 4 lesson on the topic 3.1, lesson 2, titled Property of Air. Carefully read the objective, lesson flow, and assessment. We will now have a look at the objective, lesson flow, and assessment of the lesson which you have looked at. Objectives. Students can 1. Realize that air takes up space. 2. Conduct experiment to confirm their prediction. Lesson flow. Start from key question. Does air take up space? Explain the flow of experiment and ask students to predict the results of the experiment. Conduct experiment and check the results. Discussion of the result of experiment. Students discuss examples, which shows air takes up space. Assessment. Confirm the students' understanding on air takes up space, their prediction, and explanation on the experiment. As you can see, the lesson objectives, lesson flow, and assessment are consistent in terms of air takes up space. In the main contents of the Teacher's Manual, the lesson objective, assessment, and lesson flow are clearly indicated in all lessons. These objectives, assessment, and lesson flow in a lesson are consistent. All of them relate to each other and cannot be considered separately. Now we have an exercise for you to do. Look at the Teacher's Manual of Science Grade 4, Topic 7.1, Lesson Sprouting, and discuss how objectives, lesson flow, and assessment are related. I hope you have done well with the exercise and the presentation. And now I'm going to take you to Lecture 2. Lecture 2 will be all about 4 parts of lesson flow. But before we look at the 4 parts of the lesson flow, we have group discussion to do. In groups, review the 4 main parts of science lesson flow learned in Module 1-3. What should you do first? Recall from memory the lesson flow of the video lesson, Properties of Air, Module 1-3. Discuss what was done in the 4 main parts of science lesson flow. I hope you have done the discussion well. Let's continue. The lesson flow sets the standards of lesson plan development. There are 4 main parts of the lesson flow or sequence. The first part is called the introduction. The second part is the activity. The third part is the discussion. And the fourth part of the lesson is the summary. In those 4 main parts of the lesson, there are 8 steps. Now let's look at those 8 steps in detail. The 4 main parts, which is the introduction, has the introduction and key question. In the activity part of the lesson, this is when students are able to predict, experiment or do observation, and are able to gain results. In the discussion part of the lesson, that's where we have students to reason out and are able to find new ideas. And in the summary of the lesson, students are able to sum up what they have learned. Now I will take you through the 8 steps in a lesson. Let's now look at the 8 steps of the lesson carefully. At the introduction part of the science lesson, the following points must be considered. It is important to motivate, catch attention, and draw students' interest to the lesson topic. Teachers should connect lesson topic with their prior knowledge, experiences, and their environment in daily life. Teacher must give key question of the lesson to the students for them to generate their ideas, views, and opinions to the question. Remind students not to worry about making mistakes on their ideas and opinions. At the activity part of science lesson, the following points must be considered. It is vital to allow students to predict or guess in response to the key question posed by the teacher. The answer of questions or results of prediction should not be given to students at the beginning. Ensure to inform students to write down what they have predicted or discussed. Teacher can write what students predicted or discussed. Allow students to try out their ideas by doing experiments or observation. Always encourage students to put into practice of their ideas. Make students to observe the result and record. At the discussion part of science lesson, the following points must be considered. It is important to allow children to compare their prediction and results of experiment. Students discuss what the reasons, such as why their results are different from their prediction or why the results are same. Teacher guide the students to research the key concept of the topic through the discussion or of reasoning the results. At the summary part in science lesson, the following points must be considered. It is important to allow students to summarize their findings by themselves. Teacher encourages and guides students to generate new ideas to support their findings and how they can do experiments to test their suggestions. Teacher assess understanding of students and comments, correct their ideas as necessary. Teacher briefly informs students next topic linked to the concepts of current lesson. Now there is another exercise for you to do. This time you are going to work in groups again. State the 4 main parts of the lesson flow. Look at the Grade 4 Teacher's Manual, Topic 7.1, Lesson 2, Sprouting, and identify what is done in each step. I hope your presentation on the 4 parts of the lesson was done successfully. Now I will take you to Lecture 3, which is all on assessment. There are 2 types of assessment that the Teacher's Manual emphasizes on. One, which is formative assessment, mainly conducted during the lesson. The second type of assessment is summative assessment, mainly conducted at the end or after the lesson. Formative assessment. It is also known as classroom assessment. It is an ongoing process and interaction between teacher and students. It is used to help students improve their attitude, skills, or understanding of the lesson concepts. It also helps both students and teachers to see where they need to improve and how to improve. Here is the example of formative assessment. An example of formative assessment focused on scientific process skills in the lesson. Teacher observes, gives questions and answers to allow students to predict. If some of them do not predict, teacher will encourage the students to predict the result with reasons as part of the activity. Summative assessment. Assessment of learning is to measure, record, and report on students' level of achievement in regards to specific learning objectives in the lessons. They are often known as assessment of learning. And we have another example for you in the teacher's manual. They can be examples of summative assessment which focuses on knowledge and understanding of a scientific concept at the end of the lesson. Teacher provides questions about the topic, methods to assess the level of achievement or understanding of the students at the summary of the lesson. Let's look at an example of summative assessment. This is an example of summative assessment which focuses on knowledge and understanding of a scientific concept in a chapter. These assessment items are to be utilized to assess the achievement or understanding at the end of a chapter. And finally, we have the last exercise for you to do. Activity for participants. In groups of 6, open textbook, but please be reminded not to look at the teacher's manual. Of grade 4, topic 7.1, lesson 2, sprouting. Give an example of formative assessment. Give an example of summative assessment. Present the assessment developed in each group. Compare the answer with the assessment in teacher's manual. I hope you have done your presentation in regard to formative and summative type of assessment. Finally, before I leave, I want to sum up the 3 lectures that we have today. The science lesson has the following lesson design. Objectives, lesson flow, and assessment are consistent. There are 4 main parts of the lesson flow: introduction, activity, discussion, and summary. And our science teacher's manual emphasizes on the 2 types of assessment, which are formative assessment and summative assessment. With that, thank you for your participation in this session, and may you have a blessed day.